Meeting to order. Today is June 21st, 2023. It's Public Safety Committee. With me present here is fellow committee member, Councilor Cocaine GIVNER, myself, Israel Rivera. In council chambers, we have Councilor Joseph McGivern. Online, we have Councilor Will Puello. And I believe that is all we have with regards to council representation. I would like to entertain an order to take up the first item.
Motion to take up item 1.
Item 1, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 1 was filed by Councilor GIVNER and supported by the entire council. Order that with community support, order that the City Forrester present his department's obligations and an action plan for addressing constituent concerns, ongoing issues, including dangerous, dead, and overgrown trees growing on or over city property. Understanding our foresters' action plans will help us understand how best to support the department's efforts. This will also help with understanding if an ordinance update or change is needed. Councilor GIVNER, since you are the founder of
Maker.
or the maker, but I mean, there's like 50 other people on this. Not, but since you are the maker, I'll allow you to express why you filed. And
Thank you. I think we've made a lot of progress with asking the various departments to come in and give a plan so that we're not filing orders that don't need to be filed because there's already a plan and, being put into action. So along the same idea as we had with having Chris Baker do a full study and share it with us as a council on like streets and street studies and things like that. I thought it might be a nice idea to invite you in and let you tell us what you're doing so that we don't keep asking you to do things you're already doing.
Whichever one, if it's John or Yoni, if you would like to come up to the front.
Yeah, please.
Feel free to come up.
Come on in. Get your own mic. And thanks for coming this evening. It's appreciated.
Yeah, we really appreciate your presence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So
what are you doing?
what am I doing? So my name is Yoni Glogauer. I'm the Holyoke Director of Conservation and Sustainability. And with us also is John Tuig, our City Forrester. We were both mentioned on this order, and it seemed like a good opportunity to pair it with an ongoing study that was already underway, a collaboration between our departments to really do a full analysis of Holyoke's urban tree canopy. This is something that started in 2021 with our urban forest equity plan. We got an MVP grant to look at a subsection of the city and get some rigorous data about how tree canopy varies between different neighborhoods and the health of trees, and get some community voice. And we did a partial tree inventory as part of that effort, actually measuring and assessing the health and species distribution of all the public trees in the city. We were able to continue these efforts recently thanks to a $30,000 grant from the DCR Urban and Community Forestry Grant Program. We wanted to expand that inventory to include the entire city, so we really knew what was going on. And pairing that with another grant from Conservation Law Foundation let us complete the inventory, but also retain our contractor, Davy Resource Group, to do a detailed analysis what the state of our trees are across the whole city. Some really cool information. And as part of that grant, we also have retained them to give some public presentations. So when this order came to us, met with Carl and John, and we thought it would be a good idea for this forum to be one of those public presentations.
I appreciate that.
I think on Zoom we have Mariah Day from Davy Resource Group. They've been wonderful to work with. You might have seen them out measuring trees in the streets of Holyoke, getting their heights and diameters. And we thought that would be a good way to start this conversation, because really what Holyoke's dealing with in its trees is not unique to our city. There's a lot of deferred maintenance that's built up over time. Really, the city needs to allocate sufficient resources, not just to get on top of the situation, but
keep up.
Keep it up, and then it'll be cheaper in the long term. So I think with that, perhaps maybe the committee would entertain.
I would entertain a motion to suspend the rules to allow Mariah Day.
Motion to suspend the rules to allow.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
And John, whenever you want to chime in, feel free. I think this is a great place for some of the residents to understand what it is that the City Forrester does too at the same time, and reasons why some things are behind, right? It's not that we don't want to do it, it's that for the lack of resources and the lack of positions that are unfilled has made it difficult for us to keep up with the demand with regards to maintaining our trees throughout the city. So, yeah. So,
Oh, there it is.
thank you.
Yeah, it's made it impossible. We haven't had a tree crew for over 15 years.
Wow.
Appreciate
I
that.
am a department of one.
Thank you. So,
And how many people should be in the department?
Should be.
Ideally.
I need at least to operate a bucket truck safely, you need at least 2 people.
Okay. But
And
for
then-
an entire department, or just to operate the?
Just to operate the truck.
Yeah.
okay. And then real quick before we go, so with regards to some of the tree maintenance along, there is a list, right? There is a system in place.
Right now, we have a contractor that's worked for about 10 or 12 days. In the past 10 or 12 days, they've removed over 30 dead and dangerous trees.
Okay.
Right now, they're working at the library, pruning and removing trees, trying to get better sight lines in
Yeah.
there for the police, get more lighting in there. They're going to continue working until the money runs out.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Perfect. Thank you for that. And again, like what Yoni said, right? The platform here provides the perfect place and the perfect setting for us to be able to convey this information to some of the constituents and the residents. Although they might not be watching now, if someone asks me throughout the community, I will tell them, look up on YouTube, Public Safety Committee, June 21, 2023, and you'll get all the answers to your questions with regards to what's happening in the city around trees and forestry. So with that being said, I would like to entertain Maura Day if she would like to come and begin elaborating on the work she's been doing.
All right. Is my audio coming through okay?
Yes.
Excellent. All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I've got a presentation. Oops. Come on. There we go. All right. Yes. So thank you all for letting me come and speak at this public meeting. As Yoni mentioned, my name is Mariah Day. I am a project manager with Davie Resource Group, and we had the pleasure of doing some of this tree inventory work in Holyoke starting in 2021 with that urban forest equity plan, which is a really interesting document. I would highly recommend if anyone is interested in getting more information about any of the things I talk about tonight. That urban forest equity plan is a great place to start, and then there's a couple other documents that we recently drafted for the city, the tree inventory analysis and maintenance schedule, and a planting plan, both of which Yoni currently has. I'm not quite sure what the status is right this minute of whether those are up online and available to the public, but I believe, and Yoni correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that they will be. So there's additional
okay.
resources.
So real
Excellent.
quick before you proceed, you already answered one of my questions, which is, will it be online? So that's already answered. The next question is, can you forward all of those documents to our administrative assistant, Jeffrey Anderson Burgos, so that he can share it with all the counselors too as well? Because I know some of them will be asking about the documents.
Yeah, I can do that.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, so with that, let's hop into this. What I want to go through this evening, and I want to keep this pretty brief, so again, lots more information than I'm going to be able to share here in those documents, but I want to go briefly through kind of why we do a tree inventory, as well as some of the inventory results, with particular focus on the maintenance needs that were identified during the tree inventory. And I'll leave the presentation with just kind of an idea about what might the city need to be doing next to keep moving forward in terms of taking care of their public trees. So at a very basic level, the reason we do tree inventories is to know what you have and what you need. Obviously, it's very difficult to implement any sort of systematic tree care program if you don't know what trees you have, where they're located, what condition they're in, what maintenance they need. All of that information compiled together can be really, really valuable in terms of coming up with some plans and figuring out what you actually need to do. And of course, that's going to help identify needs, help identify things like funding needs, staffing needs, equipment needs, as well as identify places where maybe you just in general need trees to be planted because there aren't as many as you might hope. Particularly relevant to the Public Safety Committee is also this idea of mitigating risk. So we all know that trees provide great benefits. I think that's something that's been talked about quite a bit at this point. I think everyone generally knows there's benefits that trees provide, and I'll get into that a little bit more as we go on. But obviously they also come with some level of risk associated with them, particularly when they are in really close proximity to people and structures. And I think all of us have heard of at least one instance of a tree failing and impacting a building or car or even a person. So one of the things that we did as part of this inventory was an assessment of the level of risk associated with each tree. And that is basically going to give you this baseline to help figure out where the trees that pose the greatest risk are. And then you can start systematically going through and maintaining those trees to reduce the overall level of risk that the community is exposed to due to the public tree resource. And of course, that's great for the public. It's great for the city because it's going to help reduce your overall liability. And it's great for the trees and sort of the public image of trees if they're not being allowed to fall into disrepair and cause damage. As I kind of mentioned here, planning ahead. This is all about planning ahead. Having that baseline of what trees are out there and what they need is going to help you figure out your budget needs, your staffing needs, your equipment needs. And both for a short-term time frame, sort of 1 to 2 years, but also kind of further down the line, you can start to think about, well, if we have a tree population of this specific size, we can anticipate needing to do this much work every year. And finally, knowing what you have, again, you're getting into that knowing what you need, you can figure out how you want to increase tree benefits once you know what you're starting with. Trees have become a really sort of hot topic in terms of mitigating some of the effects of climate change, particularly in urban areas. And again, kind of knowing where your trees are they equitably distributed, or are there places that need more trees? Are there places that have trees in worse condition? All of that's going to help you figure out how do we make sure that the trees on public property are providing benefits evenly across the entire city. So again, I think that we've all heard something about tree benefits before, and this slide just gives a very, very small number of the total benefits that trees provide. But some of the things that trees are doing for us every day include helping with water cycling. So they help reduce stormwater runoff, which reduces flooding, combined sewer overflow, pollution of rivers, streams, lakes, bodies of water. And then they release water back into the air, so they're part of that water cycle. Their roots help stabilize soil and prevent soil erosion. They can reduce noise and air pollution. And of course, they're producing oxygen while taking in and storing carbon dioxide, which is a major contributor to global warming. And again, these are just a small number of the benefits that trees are providing every day. There's lots of other things that they're doing. Studies have shown that they improve health outcomes, reduce stress levels, improve the perception of goods and services, increase the value of properties. So there's all these incredible things that trees are doing for us every single day. So getting now into a little bit of the inventory and what we found. We, as Yoni mentioned, started this inventory back in 2021, and were able to complete it earlier this year. And we inventoried in every neighborhood in Holyoke with the exception of Smith's Ferry. Smith's Ferry was excluded because we still did have a limited budget, and there's relatively little public roadway and residential area up in that area. It's predominantly forested land, which is not really the focus of this project. But as you can see from this image here down in the bottom left of this slide, we found about 9,358 sites in total along the public rights-of-way and in public parks and on public grounds throughout Holyoke. And in this image, the green dots are trees, the blue dots symbolize a potential planting location, and brown dots symbolize a stump. And they are kind of layered over top of each other just because of the zoom level on this map, so it's hard to see exactly how many sites there are.
Excuse me. So real quick for clarification, right? The green dots, because they all look the same green to me from here. I know that there's probably different colors, but they all look the same green. That green looks like schools, according to the key. Is that trees that are at schools?
No. So these two images don't really have anything to do with each other color-wise.
Okay. So then what do the green dots indicate on the map?
They indicate a tree.
All
so
the
there
trees.
Are,
okay.
Yeah, there's 3 types of sites we could inventory: trees, stumps, or a potential planting location.
Okay.
So every green dot is a tree.
Is a tree. I feel like I've never seen that many trees in Ward 1 and Ward 2.
Yes. So because of the density of streets in those areas, you're seeing a lot more inventoried trees there, just because there's more public rights of way there to inventory along.
Okay.
There are tons and tons of trees. In fact, there's probably way more trees.
I was going to say, there's way
western
more
half
trees
of
in where
Holyoke.
Holyoke Community College is.
Absolutely. So there's way more trees out in the western half of Holyoke than there are in the eastern half, but they are held in these large, privately owned parcels of land.
Okay.
So they're not really interacting with streets as much.
All right. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. So the graph here on the right-hand side of the slide is showing kind of 3 different management jurisdictions that we broke down the inventory into, which are municipal in the dark green, schools in the light green, and the housing authority in the orange. And that's just because these 3 different entities all have trees that are considered public trees on some of their properties, but they may have different budgeting or staffing needs and may want to manage their trees differently. I'm going to pretty much just focus on the municipal stuff tonight because that's the vast majority of the sites that were inventoried. But some other takeaways here. Most of the sites that were inventoried were trees. We're looking at about 6,834 in total. There were a few stumps, not too many. And then there were actually quite a few potential planting locations identified during the inventory as well. About 24% of those sites that we collected were potential planting locations, which means that Holyoke has a lot of ability right now to do more planting and get more trees into the streetscapes. So once we have all this information about the trees, one of the things we like to look at is species diversity. And having diverse species present in your tree population is really important for a few different reasons. The major one is for protecting against pests and disease. If you have basically a monoculture or a huge overabundance of one species or maybe one genus of tree, that is going to open you up to a lot of pest and disease issues because there's a huge number of trees that are suitable for a single pest or disease. And you also have a lot more you've put all your eggs in one basket, right? You have a lot more of your canopy that is susceptible to any single pest or disease. And unfortunately, there are a lot of historical cases of cities doing exactly that, planting mainly one type of street tree and then having them completely wiped out by something like Dutch elm disease. I think probably people have heard about the Asian longhorn beetle in Worcester, Massachusetts. Or more recently, emerald ash borer, which impacts ash trees. So Generally speaking, when we look at species diversity, we want to see no individual species make up more than 10% of the inventoried trees. And the graph down here at the bottom left shows the species diversity for Holyoke as a whole. And you can see that there are two species, Norway maple and red maple, which comprise 10% or more of the inventoried trees. And of course, those two together comprise about 22% of the inventoried trees, which means that we've got an overabundance of these two species, but also an overabundance of maples in general. This is not uncommon. I would actually say that Holyoke's doing really well. Most communities I work in have a lot more than 12% Norway maple. They were heavily overplanted historically within New England, so there's a lot of communities that are still feeling that legacy.
Right, I was gonna kind of ask on that. Is that something that, like, with regards to like, is that part of like the nature of this New England, right? Having that many maple trees, or is that something that was planted specifically?
Yeah, so Norway maple is not a native species to New England. It's from Europe, from Norway. And it has been heavily overplanted historically. But you actually hit on something really great there, which is that there are a fairly limited number of species that are native to New England that do well in a city environment. So the reason red maple is so common has something to do with the fact that it is a pretty good hardy street tree, and it's a native street tree. So there's always going to be an element of you can't really get away from some of these native species making up a bigger proportion of your urban forest as a whole. But as much as possible, we want to see diversity. And then these different little charts here up on the top right of this slide show the breakdown for the 5 most common species per neighborhood. And anything in red is something that is overabundant. So more than 10% of the trees in that neighborhood. And you see some different things here. So in Ingleside, pin oaks and green ashes are actually overabundant, although they aren't overabundant when you look at the city as a whole. And the situation's even more drastic in South Holyoke, where green ash makes up 63% of the inventoried public trees. So that is of particular concern because green ash is susceptible to emerald ash borer, which is known to be present in Holyoke, and it's definitely impacting those trees. So in this case, we have a situation where this one species was overplanted in this specific neighborhood, and now, because of an invasive insect pest, that neighborhood in particular stands to lose well over half of its public trees as a result of that that insect.
So real quick,
it's-
and I'm sorry
yeah.
to cut you off again. So when they get impacted by whatever it is that impacts them, right? They literally just wilt and die then, right? So then that would be on us to get rid of that tree.
In a few years.
Do we have a plan around?
We did treat, you can treat green ash for emerald ash borer. There's a pesticide called emamectin benzoate. So under the previous DPW director, we were able to find funding and treat something like 200 green ashes,
Wow.
the ones that were in the best shape. So that saves them for 2 years. But now we're already coming up to the point where we need to find funding to retreat them. They actually inject it into the trunk. And obviously that's an extra expense, but less expensive than
Then cutting them down.
cutting down that many trees pretty much all at the same time.
In the long run, right?
Yeah.
All right, thank you. I'm sorry to cut you off. It's just
No,
questions
it's
pop
great.
up when I see all these data and numbers. Thank you for the presentation. This helps a lot.
Great. Yeah, no, and please keep asking questions. It's helpful for me to know where I need to elaborate better. All right, so we also looked at tree condition, and we rate that on a scale from excellent to dead. And kind of just to summarize the different categories that we used, anything that's good, very good, or excellent, those are trees in really nice shape. There's nothing much wrong with them. There might be some minor issues, but not too much going on there. Trees in fair condition are more mixed. There may be some problems, but usually there's something that can either be fixed through maintenance, like pruning, or there's something that the tree can probably fix itself over time. So like, if a vehicle strikes a tree, causes a wound on the trunk, the tree may be able to sort of heal that over in time. trees in poor or worse condition are going to be trees that have much more significant issues. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to be removed, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they pose a greater risk than other trees, but it just does mean that they're probably not going to be productive members of the landscape for much longer. So in general, the trees in Holyoke were in fair or better condition, so that's good to see. And we break it down again by neighborhood, this very colorful graph on the right. The greens and blues are trees in fair or better condition, and anything in orange or red is poor condition. And so you'll notice that some neighborhoods, like Homestead Ave, more than 80% of the trees in Homestead Avenue have, they are in good or better condition, which is amazing. On the opposite side of the coin, South Holyoke has a lot of trees in poor or worse condition. So I'm pretty confident that that is due to the presence of emerald ash borer and that 63% ash trees there. A lot of those trees are in decline and are really kind of at the point where they aren't treatable. So there are some that should be treated, but there are more that also are probably just going to need to be removed and replaced. Downtown also has a larger percentage of trees in poor or worse condition, as does Rock Valley. Although Rock Valley is a little bit of an outlier, it is probably more due to the sampling methods we used there than anything else. So out in the western part of the city, there's a lot more streets that are wooded. So there's forested land adjacent to roadways out there. And in those areas, we didn't inventory every single tree because it would have been just a huge volume of data that might not be very useful to the city in terms of trying to do maintenance and figure out ways to improve public safety. So we were really just looking for trees that were in rough shape, needed maintenance, or were posing a higher level of risk. So that's probably why Rock Valley has so many trees that are in poor or worse condition, because we were specifically trying to find and inventory those trees in those areas. Another thing we can look at is the relative age of the trees. Now, we can't measure age directly during a tree inventory. There are ways to do that, but they're very time intensive, so they're not suitable when you're working on such a large scale as we are during a standard municipal tree inventory. Instead, what we do is relate size to age. So we kind of break it down into 4 general categories, which are young. These are your smallest trees. Then established. These trees are a little bit bigger. They're kind of more what you start to think of as, oh, that's a mature tree. And then we have maturing trees and mature trees, which are the biggest ones. Those are the largest size. And again, there's kind of an industry guideline that we want to see here. We want to see most of the trees in a population be in that young or established age category, with fewer ones in the maturing and mature age category. And the reason for this is that tree mortality is really, really high when trees are young, particularly in urban environments. There's a very sad statistic that the average street tree only lives 7 to 12 years. So you really have to have a lot of young trees if you want a few of them to make it to those largest and oldest sizes, which is where they're providing the greatest benefits. So the graph here at the top shows the age distribution of Holyoke's trees for the entire city. And you can see these green bars, they actually follow the industry standard pretty closely. However, that's not necessarily the case, again, when we break it down by neighborhood. There are some neighborhoods like Churchill, Springdale, the Flats, and Whiting Farms that have more young trees than is considered sort of ideal. And this isn't necessarily a problem, but it is helpful to know because that means that those are neighborhoods where the maintenance needs of those trees are going to be a bit different than neighborhoods that have a higher percentage of those older trees. There's also some neighborhoods like Highland Park, the Highlands, Ingleside, Jarvis Avenue, and South Holyoke, which have fewer young trees than would be considered ideal. So these are areas that there may need to be more focus on planting to get more young trees in the ground. So there's a pool of trees growing to replace mature trees as they die or have to be removed for other reasons. And I think that's particularly important in South Holyoke, where we've already noted there's a lot of trees in poor condition, There's a lot of ash trees that are going to have to either be treated for EAB or potentially removed as they decline due to emerald ash borer.
Real quick, I think a lot of the younger trees in the flats has to do with when the Greening Communities program first started, because I remember them planting a lot of trees in the flats neighborhood.
That's why they're that way.
Right,
Churchill.
right. That's why it's like that. And then the older, now we got to get up the hill and start planting trees.
Because that's the only place you're allowed to plant through these grants.
Right.
is those areas.
Oh, CDBG.
You can't
Yeah.
go to
Right.
the highlands and plant trees through these grants.
Because it doesn't fall
Right.
under this.
Well, the DCR has their established planting
Right.
zone. They won't go beyond Beach Street and Northampton Street.
Okay.
So,
So when we did the Brown Ave corridor, when we knocked down the trees and we added new ones,
right. They
those
planted
weren't
those.
a part of the program? Or that
Brown Ave was inside. I think they replanted that street.
they replanted the whole
They
street?
did planting there, but it wasn't part of
The
a,
seed-
it wasn't part of a grant
Okay.
program. It was
Yeah.
part of a project.
All right, perfect. Thank you. And I'm sorry again for cutting you off. I just have questions.
No, it's great. All right. So we also look at what defects the trees have, and this is related to the risk assessment, which I'll talk about a little bit more later, but we recorded the defect that we felt was most likely to cause tree failure within the next year. So these are some examples here, the photos of different defects. So we've got some decayed wood, a decayed tree stem on the left. In the middle, this is an example of root problems where a contractor who was replacing a sidewalk came through and just lopped off all the structural roots on one side of the tree. And then on the far right, we've got what we affectionately call WABEX, which are weakly attached branches and codominant stems. So you can see that there's this cluster of large stems all coming from the same point on the main trunk. And that can make a tree very prone to splitting at these points. So we found that dead and dying parts was the most common defect that we recorded. About 26% of the inventoried trees were recorded with that defect, which is actually a great thing to know because dead and dying parts can usually be mitigated through maintenance, whether that's removing a tree that is mostly dead or in really, really rough shape, or by pruning out dead wood on a tree that's otherwise relatively healthy. So over a quarter of the inventoried trees could have their condition improved and potentially have some risk associated with them mitigated just by doing some of this maintenance. So that's a great result. Another thing to note is that about 26% of the inventoried trees were recorded with a defect of tree architecture or weakly attached branches and codominant stems. And so these trees, these two types of defects, are things that can typically be fixed when a tree is still young through structural pruning. So again, another type of proactive maintenance, structural young tree training, could potentially mitigate over a quarter of the issues that we're seeing with mature trees in the city. And one of the great things about young tree training is that you're working with young, small trees. So you're able to do it with less equipment, less staff, it takes less time, produces less waste, and it costs less money. So this is can be a really effective way to reduce the risk trees pose in the community and just make sure that you have a really strong population of trees as they grow. All right, I'm going to pivot and talk quickly about some of the benefits that we were able to calculate that the city's public trees provide. I want to start with a caveat. This is not all the benefits that these trees are providing. In fact, this is an extremely small proportion of the total benefits that the city's public trees are providing, and an even smaller portion of the total benefits that all the trees in Holyoke on both public and private property are providing. But this program can estimate the total carbon storage for the public trees, and estimated that over 4,500 tons of carbon are currently stored in Holyoke's inventoried public trees, and that's worth about $780,000. And another 63 tons of carbon are taken into those trees and added to the stored carbon every year, worth about $10,800 annually. The trees are preventing or mitigating about 12 million gallons of stormwater runoff each year, worth about
So we should plant more
$10,400.
trees. We should plant more trees. We need that for the CSO.
Right? Yeah, so that's actually something that a lot of communities are thinking about, is using trees as stormwater control measures. It helps both because you've got more permeable surfaces for water to sink into, but I've also seen a lot of things called tree filter boxes going in, which are these specifically designed stormwater control infrastructure that includes a tree. So they're a great thing to use in areas where it's really tough to plant, because you basically take out a storm drain and put in a drain box with a tree in it. So
We have
that's a
some of
little
those
version,
on.
but I'm excited about them.
I was going to say we have some of those on Dwight Street near the intersection with Heritage.
In the train depot, there's a couple.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you again.
Yeah. Trees also are helping filter out air pollutants. So I know that air quality is definitely a big concern in Pioneer Valley. And the inventoried trees remove about 2,500 pounds of airborne pollutants every year, which, when you think about the fact that these are particles that we can't usually see with the naked eye until it gets really bad, like it was recently with the smoke from the Canadian wildfires, that's a lot of pollutants that are being taken out of the air.
And that's just based on the inventory that that you guys did, right? It's not based on all the other trees. Yeah. Oh, wow.
Exactly. And so we inventoried an extremely small proportion of the total trees in Holyoke. Most of the trees in the city are actually on private property. And there are different types of analysis that you could potentially do in the future. There's something called an urban tree canopy assessment, which uses remote sensing to figure out the total tree canopy area. And I think there has been some work on that done in the past, Yoni, right?
Yeah, there was a 2014 study, I think also by Davey.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep, so there's some information from about 10 years ago, so it wouldn't hurt to update that in the future, but that type of assessment can really get at this idea of public versus private trees and where there's planting potential that isn't just in the public right-of-way. And sort of the final thing I want to highlight from the benefits is the replacement value of the public trees. So again, we inventoried 6,834 trees, and this program, it's called iTreeEco, calculated the replacement value of those trees at $13.5 million. So replacement value is this kind of theoretical value that is basically what it would cost to replace every tree with a tree of similar size and species. Obviously, you can't really do that. You can't take a 20-inch oak tree and immediately take it out and replace it with another 20-inch oak tree. But it does kind of give a great summarization of what the total worth of the city's trees are. So keep that number in mind, because we are going to get to budget here in a moment. So for risk assessment, we basically are asking three questions. We are looking at the trees and saying, how likely is the tree or part of the tree to fail within a year? How likely is that part to impact a target, such as a person, a car, or a home? And how much damage would that part do if it struck that target? And risk assessment is both art and science. We come up with a qualitative scale for it that runs from extreme down to low risk. And in Holyoke, we found no extreme risk trees, which is great. We found 20 high risk trees, 456 moderate risk trees, and most of the trees that we inventoried were low risk, about 93%. And what this can do is basically tell you which trees need maintenance sooner rather than later. These high-risk trees are the highest priority for getting either removed or pruned to reduce the risk that they're posing. Moderate risk trees are then the next priority, and low-risk trees can typically be maintained either during a standard sort of cyclical pruning program, or you can kind of get to them as funding, staffing is available.
Real quick for a frame of reference. So on Main Street, we have a bunch of trees, which would be the Flats and South Holyoke, more or less. And a lot of the trees, they look good, but at the same time, they have a bunch of branches that look dead. Would they be considered moderate risk?
It depends on the size of the dead branches and to some extent the species of the tree. So I believe that's where a lot of those ash trees that we've been talking about are located. Ash trees definitely drop dead branches more readily than other species. But risk is kind of the intersection of a bunch of different factors. So it's not just, is there some dead material that could fall? It's how long has it been dead? And more importantly, what are the targets around that it could impact and how much damage could it do? So the same tree, if you're thinking about the target being a house versus a person, could have two different risk ratings.
Right.
Yeah.
Before you continue, I just had a quick question about, you mentioned the treatment of some of the high-risk trees, the ash, oak or ash trees? Ash?
Yeah, green
They're just
ash.
called ash?
Yeah,
Okay.
they're green ash, technically.
Okay. So what percentage of the high-risk, the 1% of high-risk trees are these ash trees?
I do not know the answer to that question off the top of my head. However, Holyoke has basically a data management program for this inventory called Tree Keeper, which at the end of the presentation, if you're interested, I can swap over and show you that really quickly. And you could do that kind of analysis. You could really quickly search and find out how many high and moderate risk trees in the city are ashes.
Gotcha. Because I guess I would wonder, of the high-risk trees that we would want to treat with funding, if 1% of $13.5 million of the trees is $135K, like, it sounds to me sometimes like it might be less expensive to remove and replace. So I'd be curious about some of these numbers a little more when you get there. Thanks.
Sure. All right, so getting now into the maintenance needs that we identified during the inventory, we found about 600 trees that we felt should be removed. These were trees that were either in serious decline or potentially trees that posed enough of a risk that even if they looked healthy, they weren't worth retaining on the landscape. And of those trees, 14 are high risk, 197 were moderate risk, and 412 were low risk. So again, those high and moderate risk trees should be the first priority for removal. Low risk trees that are recommended for removal can kind of be dealt with as time or budgets allow. We also identified 320 stumps that should be removed. And the reason that we record stumps is mostly so that you know where those are, because if you remove the stump, you may be able to plant a new tree in that location. We also assigned 265 trees for what we call priority pruning. These are high and moderate risk trees that need some type of pruning. These could be trees with dead limbs that could be pruned. So they don't need to be removed, but they do need some maintenance in order to reduce the risk that they're posing. And these two categories together are what we would call reactive maintenance. So these are things where there's already a problem. We now know about it. We have to react to that and handle the issue. The next two categories are what we would call proactive maintenance. So we are not responding to a known issue. We are just going out and sort of doing preventative maintenance on trees. And so the first of those categories is routine pruning. At the time of the inventory, about 4,000 of the trees that we assessed should be included in this type of pruning cycle. And these priority pruning trees, once they've been attended to and have their risk brought down to low or moderate potentially, those should be included in the routine pruning cycle as well. And there's a bunch of different scenarios for the length of a routine pruning cycle. Kind of the longest you want to go is 10 years. Tree condition has been shown to decline pretty significantly after not being pruned for 10 years. And 5 years is kind of the ideal scenario. So the idea would be you prune 1/5 of the city's trees every year and you rotate throughout the city over time. Young tree training, which I had mentioned earlier, is also a form of proactive or preventative maintenance. And about 1,600 trees, as of the time of the inventory, should be included in this cycle, which should run 3 years. The reason it's shorter than a routine pruning cycle is because young trees are growing more rapidly, so you have to keep coming back to them more frequently. And so that would mean about 550 trees need to be assessed and pruned if needed every year. Another good thing to note about young tree training and routine pruning, although it looks like there's a lot of trees in these cycles each year, not every single tree is actually going to need to be pruned every cycle. So even if you have 800 trees in the routine pruning cycle each year, maybe only 500 of those actually need pruning during that cycle. And sort of the final category that we looked at was tree planting. So we identified 2,204 potential planting locations throughout the city. And kind of with tree planting, there's a lot of different ways to think about it. As I mentioned, we did work up a planting plan for Holyoke. So if this is something you want to learn a little bit more about, there is some more information available in that plan. But basically, if you're removing trees, you have to replant in order to prevent you from losing trees over time. And at minimum, you have to replace every tree that's removed with a tree being planted in order to avoid losing tree canopy, losing tree benefits over time. And if you're trying to grow your tree canopy, increase the number of public trees, you would need to plant at a 2-to-1 or maybe even a more like a 2.5 or 3-to-1 rate to increase the total number of trees that are maintained by the city. And based on the number of trees recommended for removal each year, you would need to plant between 124 and 242 trees each year just to break even, and more like 248 to 484 trees per year if you wanted to start growing the number of public trees in Holyoke with a 2-for-1 replacement to removal ratio. And of course, when you're thinking about tree planting, something to consider is canopy cover and tree equity. So the idea is that you want the benefits trees are providing to be equitably distributed throughout the city. The Urban Forest Equity Plan gets into this quite a bit more than I'm going to tonight, but basically, I think we're all aware there has been historic inequality and discriminatory practices that were employed in certain areas of Holyoke, and that has impacted where trees are located and also where it's easy to grow a tree. So a lot of the areas like South Holyoke, the Flats, downtown, those are tough areas to grow a tree, and they're also the areas that tend to have the fewest trees. So when you're thinking about tree planting, you want to be thinking about where should we be putting trees to balance the benefits with sort of the need for benefits. All right, so here we go, getting into the budgeting. So on the right here, I've got sort of a summarization of the budget table that's provided in the tree inventory analysis and maintenance schedule. It's much more detailed and broken down in that document, which makes it very unwieldy to show in a slideshow, so I'm just going to show the summary here. But if you're interested, that document is available. Yoni can make sure it gets out to everyone. And the kind of big takeaway picture is that we took all of the tree maintenance needs that we identified during the inventory, figured out the approximate contractor pricing to do that work, and spread it out over 10 years, and came up with a budget of $5.81 million that would need to be spent over the next 10 years in Holyoke in order to do all of the maintenance work that was recommended during this inventory. So that's an average of about $581,000 per year. But keep in mind, the replacement value of your trees is $13.5 million. So it is a big number, but your trees are worth it. And that budget is going to be higher to some extent, usually in the early years of these types of programs, because you are having to deal with those high and moderate risk trees that need to be mitigated right away. Once those trees have been dealt with, you get into more of a routine maintenance groove. You're doing that proactive maintenance. And that is both easier to estimate and tends to be less expensive in the long run than just waiting and mitigating problems as they arise.
Hey, Mariah, thank you. Thank you for letting us new counselors know that, right? It's a lot of responsibility on our shoulders.
Absolutely. All right. So, like I said, I summarized this information into sort of 5 different categories, which are priority maintenance. These are your reactive types of maintenance, the high and moderate risk tree removals and pruning. And again, this is the stuff that really has to get done. If you do nothing else with this document, let it guide you to mitigate your high and moderate risk trees.
Real quick, what's the cost on just mitigating the high and moderate trees? Do we have that cost?
We sure do. That's the top line over here on the right. That is going to cost, for the municipal trees, about $300,000.
That's more affordable.
Exactly. Over a 2-year time frame, about $300,000. It's a little bit more when you include the trees on schools and housing authority property, but not a huge amount more.
No, they got to maintain those themselves.
Yeah. I know that it's like different pools of funding.
They have
and so forth.
budgets.
So that's why they're separated out, because the
Thank you.
municipal funding is separate. Then we've got routine tree removals. These are going to be both your tree and your stump removals, the low risk stuff. This can be done over a longer period of time. For the sake of this theoretical budget, because this budget is theoretical, it's probably what I would call an aspirational budget, meaning that it's something to aim for, but we all recognize that it would be a very big task to actually achieve this over 10 years. It's probably going to take longer than that. But for the purposes of sort of a demonstration, I put all of those routine low-risk tree removals and stump removals in the first 6 years of the maintenance schedule. And that, again, about $300,000 to do that work. So again, not too excessive. Then we get into the proactive maintenance. So this is your routine pruning and your young tree training. And that, again, is cyclical. So it's something that's going to be starting in year 1 of the maintenance schedule and will continue all 10 years, and ideally will continue in perpetuity beyond that. And that would cost about almost $1.3 million over the total of 10 years. So that's about $130,000 a year. Again, when you break this down by categories, they aren't too crazy, but they do start adding up. And then we get into tree planting. So in order to at least maintain the number of trees that are currently present in Holyoke, as well as start adding some new ones over the next 10 years, it would cost about $2.6 million. And that would plant almost 2,000 trees over the next 10 years. And then finally, there's a category for inventory and inspections. The inventory is only as good as the updates are. So John mentioned at the start here that 30 trees have been removed by a contractor. Unless those have been updated in the city's tree maintenance program, the tree keeper software I mentioned, the software is out of date. The inventory is very much a snapshot in time, and unless it's updated routinely, it goes out of date.
So real quick, I'm sorry again, for the sake of transparency and for the people that are listening online, those 30 trees that were recently cut are not in this whole presentation. Okay, that's good.
No, I believe they are.
Oh,
so,
they are.
Yeah.
They have been.
So unless they were updated, and I think that I probably did the work for this before those trees were removed, but yeah, they're probably still in the software unless someone has gone in and made those updates.
Okay,
so that's either something that the city can be doing as work is done, but very hard to do that with a department of one. Or it can be something that you hire someone like Davie Resource Group to do every 5 to 7 years. There's also some routine inspections that should be done on the trees. That's going to be sort of going out and answering requests to do tree inspections, as well as keeping an eye on certain trees that we identified in the inventory as needing continual monitoring because there's some sort of emerging problem that we didn't feel merited removal, but needs watching. And that would cost about $500,000 over the 10 years. So that's pretty reasonable as well. All right, so that all leaves us with kind of like, great, we did all this analysis, what do we do now? The first thing is planning. So we've come up with our idea of an ideal budget and an ideal maintenance schedule for the city of Holyoke based on the work that needs to be done, but that may not be achievable. You folks as city councilors and as people who are intimately involved with the workings of the city, who are making these budgets, are really the ones who have to think about, well, what can we do? how do we want to implement this plan and get some of this maintenance work done, because you're the experts on your city. And a big component of that's going to be securing funding. Obviously, in order to keep doing this long term, there needs to be budget funding coming from the city. It can't just be Yoni going out and getting grant funding, because that's not guaranteed. It's sporadic. It's often dependent on what the federal government or the state government is offering in terms of grants in any given time. There have been some really good opportunities recently to apply for bigger grants. So some of that might be coming through, which will help in the short term. But again, in order to keep maintaining trees in the long run, the city has to invest some of their own funding into this project. And then kind of once you've made a plan, once you've secured funding, it's about doing that maintenance. So that could be done with contractors. It could be done with new staff that the city hires to add to the forestry department. It could be done with city staff that are kind of tangential to the forestry department, like DPW staff. And that's going to require training. It's going to require equipment. And there's a lot of different ways to kind of get that work done. But again, it depends on what the city can manage and kind of what works best for each individual community. So that's all I've got for you this evening. I'm not sure what our time frame here is, if we have time for some more questions, if you have any. But my email is here on this slide. Yoni also has my email. So if you think of more questions later on, please do feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help out and answer questions where I can. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Mariah. It was a great presentation, very insightful information. And I guess I'll open it up to anybody that's on the committee first, and then I'll open it up to anyone after. Anybody else? Joe? Councilor McGivern, I see Councilor Ramboletti too has her hand raised. I will recognize you after Councilor McGivern.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Mariah, thank you very much. Incredible presentation. I could not disagree with anything you put in front of us, except maybe one. It wasn't brief. But it was and is incredibly, not a presentation, but it's also the information that you gave us gives us a lot to think about, and I think it's wonderful. I just it's kind of a question, but I grew up not too far from here. If you left City Hall and went kind of west, you hit Maple Street, and you hit Chestnut Street, horse chestnuts, Elm Street, elm trees, Pine Street, pine trees. I grew up on Beech Street. There aren't too many beech trees left, but we got a few. Oak Street, Linden Street, Locust Street, Sycamore Street. I think the founding fathers had an idea of the importance of trees way back when, that 150 years ago, as we developed this city. But my question is, in our backyard, we had a horse banana tree. Do you know what that is?
I am not familiar with that common name. Is that a pawpaw, maybe?
Well, maybe close, but I found out as I got older, it's a catalpa tree.
Oh, okay. Yep. Okay. I know catalpa.
Because
Horse banana.
I threw one and it stuck in my friend's forearm one time in our backyard, so the tree was gone after that. But when you're planting different species, do you look at the names of these streets and try to match them, or is there there's probably better reasons for the type of trees that you do plant, as you explained?
Yeah, so, I mean, I haven't made any, planting plans for Holyoke, in terms of, actual trees specifically designated for certain locations at this point. But there's a lot of factors that go into choosing the appropriate tree for each location. A big one is how much space it has to grow, both above and below ground. You don't want to put a tree that's going to reach a massive, massive size in a tiny, tiny little cutout in the sidewalk. That's how you get sidewalk problems.
Right.
That's how you get folks complaining that their pipes are being damaged by trees. Right. You also want to look again at species diversity. It would be good for Holyoke to plant things other than maples wherever possible, just to increase the diversity of the tree species present on the landscape. And then you also have to think about things like heat and cold tolerance. Salt. Are there any ornamental values that you're trying to achieve? Fall color, interesting bark, spring flowering. any of that stuff. So it's an art. It's one of my favorite things that I do because it's very, very fun to pick through a catalog of trees and say, let's try this one here.
Well spoken, well said, and I appreciate that. And as you mentioned, we have one incredible city employee who is that one-person department called forestry, and John has been with us for a long time, and we definitely appreciate him. That we even bought John a $240,000 truck that is sitting in the garage because we got to get that second person to go out with them.
Get somebody. Yep.
And John, I just want to tell you, I'm not asking you any questions about that, but we are working on that. And
Awesome.
I've lost my patience with a couple people I have a lot of faith in, but right now one is in room 1 and with this particular subject, not overall. He's doing great, but we're going to work on that, and that means we got to work on increasing the forestry department because we can do all this wonderful work, but we need the people that know what they're doing and maintaining it and being our eyes out there as we take care of the maintenance and the issues that come with trees. But great job, Mariah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Tessa Murphy-Ramboletti?
Thank you, and thank you so much for this presentation. I love the way that you light up when you talk about trees. So does Yoni. It's great.
True.
Really, really appreciate it. Right now it is budget season, of course, and you did mention how funding is going to play an important role and that we cannot just rely on grants, that the city does need to put some money towards this. And looking at our budget, I know that the tree climber position, as Councilor McGivern mentioned, we have this truck and we don't have the tree climber position or the maintenance person position. But from your own, I guess, professional experience, if we had to choose one or the other of those positions, we can't, as a city council, add anything to the budget. So whatever's been cut by the mayor has been cut by the mayor. But just thinking ahead, if we could only add one position to the forestry department, what would be our best investment in your opinion?
I mean, I think you need to get that person to help actually run the bucket truck. As was mentioned, that was a big investment, purchasing that truck, and having the staff to run that would allow you to start going out doing some of this work, some of this tree pruning, maybe some of the tree removal work, hitting those high and moderate risk trees that really need to be maintained. And then the great thing about that is that once those are done, you could start bringing in contractors to do more of the low risk trees, or that can be one of those things that the staff do when they aren't trying to do other things, is removing or pruning low risk trees.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Counselor GIVNER?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was curious about fruit trees. I love all the tree talk, but I just wonder if there are native fruit trees that could be planted in a city like Holyoke. I've definitely grown up around a lot of, Northeast type of fruit trees, and I love the idea of them blossoming in the spring and bearing actual fruit during the summer. So I wonder if that's considered, and if not, maybe, what the reasons are for us always having kind of the same, not just leafy trees, but leafy shade trees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's a couple of things going on there. One is that large trees provide more benefits, and most fruit-bearing trees are in the category of what we call small trees. So they're not as valuable in terms of shade, providing shade, removing air pollutants, that kind of thing. The other major reason you don't see a lot of fruit trees planted as street trees or on public lands in general is because there's liability that comes with that. So what if somebody eats fruit from a tree that picked up contaminants in the ground and now they're sick? It's a little bit of a challenge. There are communities that are doing some really neat stuff with putting in edible landscapes or orchards that are community garden orchards. I want to say I just saw something about one in Cambridge. There was like a news article about it. It had to do with like brownfield remediation as well. So very cool project. So those projects are definitely doable. They're a bit of a challenge to work into streetscapes. And that's, again, because of the liability issues, but also because fruit fall is kind of messy. So if people aren't picking every single apple that's going to come off that tree, those are going to fall and rot on your sidewalks and your roads, which is often a maintenance challenge that residents don't like. And the people who have to do the maintenance work to get those off the street aren't super fond of that either. So it's a tough needle to thread right there, but definitely if it's something that there are people who are passionate about it in Holyoke, you could look into putting in some sort of edible landscape, but probably not on the streets. It should probably be in more of a parkland setting.
Thank you. Councilor Puello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks everybody for the presentation. So my question is just, again, I caught most of the presentation. I apologize if my question was already answered, but I guess I just want to hear more about the trees that are in South Holyoke that are sick, and the green disease. I didn't really hear the whole name of what we called it, but I did hear the part where Yoni said they had been treated 2 years ago. So I guess I just want to hear more a little bit about that. I mean, what's the plan for this, specifically this section? What funding sources are we looking for? It would have been nice to see an ARPA application if eligible. I'm not sure what the instructions are from room one, but it sounds like this is really, really important, and it sounds like it's something we need to get on. I don't know if the committee's planning on tabling this to follow up, or if we got to file a separate order. But if we could just hear about what's the plan for this specific neighborhood, because it sounds like it's important. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, definitely. I think Yoni might be better equipped to answer that one than me.
Yeah, so the species is green ash. This is a common street tree that's been planted a lot in the past few decades. And since 2001, there's been an invasive insect called the emerald ash borer. It was first introduced in Detroit, and it's been spreading throughout the eastern U.S. It actually lays its eggs under the bark of the tree, and when they hatch, they eat all the living cambium on the inside and basically kill it within a few years. So it is present in Holyoke, and pretty much, so Main Street, basically from Dwight Street all the way to Sargent Street, spanning the flats in South Holyoke. It's what we would call, Jackson Street, a little farther. It's basically what we would call a near monoculture of green ash. Almost every tree on the street is that one species. So some of them are already infected with the insect. We were able to treat 200 of the trees in better condition in 2001. You can inject an herbicide. 2021. Getting my years mixed up. I think the DPW at that time was able to transfer some leftover funds within its budget to cover it. But you do need to be treating every couple years if you want to be keeping the trees in perpetuity. So I've definitely brought this to our new DPW superintendent. I don't know what funding is available in the budget at this time, or if it would need to be a special appropriation, or maybe something with the supplemental budget that I've heard might be coming in September. But I think the bigger picture is we need to start thinking proactively about selectively removing green ashes that are in the worst shape, and at least replacing them with something else so we don't lose all the canopy at the same time. But definitely in the short term, this treatment is something to keep it from happening all at once.
Thank you for that, Yoni.
I need to talk to Carl some more about it.
No, go ahead.
A lot of these trees are already gone past the point that they have to be removed. Me personally, I'm not in favor of spending money on treating. Most of these trees are planted in very small pits, and they don't really have much of a chance anyway. I know through Mike McManus you got some funding to treat them the first time around. I need to talk to Carl some more and find out which way we want to go. But a lot of them there on South Summer Street, they're in really bad shape already, and I'm planning on taking everything from Jackson Street and Sargent Street down. with this contractor while he's in town, and we have to look somewhere for a replacement.
Thank you for that, John, because that was going to be my next question was like, with regards to treating, is there a way that you could either provide the council the cost benefits, right? Like if how much it costs to treat and how much would it cost to actually take down the tree and plant new? Because if it costs cheaper to take down the tree and plant new, I think that might be some, not to take them all down. Maybe we treat a couple of them so that way we still have the diversity. But at the same time, I drive down Main Street all the time, and the canopy is beautiful, but not beautiful at the same time, right? It's beautiful because you see all the branches, but out of those branches, you see some dead branches that look like they're gonna fall on you. So it's like, what's going on here? So thank you for that. If there's a way, Jody, or maybe John with Carl, finding out how much it costs, the differences in costs, that would be great. Or and if I have to file an order for that, let me know. If Will has to file an order for that, let him know, because a lot of those trees are in his ward, and that would be a good opportunity to be able to approach the mayor with either CDBG funding or possibly some cannabis dollars, because people got to walk down those strips anyways. You don't want to get hit by a branch while you're going into the dispensary. So there's a variety of different avenues that we could help mitigate until you get more grant funds. No, just playing. But Councilor Givner.
I also wanted to mention, like, the it's not just the cost of removing and replanting a tree. I think we also have to consider the cost of leaving that tree there and what kind of damage it does. You know, like was mentioned, if the tree is too big for the space that it was planted in originally, it may be causing more damage than it's worth. And in that case, the cost of removing it is probably still going to be less expensive than the cost of pruning and trimming it if it's going to be ripping up the street, ripping up the sidewalk. I mean, we have enough problems with ADA sidewalk issues in the city because of trees that are planted in places where they probably should never have been planted. So,
was it 7 years you said more of the life expectancy of a tree? Those have all outlived their life expectancy already.
Well, we want them to live a lot longer than that.
Well, I understand that. Yeah, we definitely do. But that wasn't good species selection at the time they were put in.
Right.
So that's
I just saw, and again, adding a side note, but like I just saw in the flats that they planted a bunch of cherry blossoms. It looks like going along, is it Bauer Street by Kelly School? Going along Sullivan Scrap? Yoni?
Yeah, what'd you put in there?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
All right, along Sullivan Scrap in the flats, are those cherry blossoms that got planted going up where Conklin is?
Oh, what species are those? There's a few different species. I think we have some Osage orange. Hang on, I have if you move to the next question, I can look up what I have for that street.
There actually is. Anybody else have any questions? No, we don't have. Yeah, we'll just wait on you. If you want, you don't have to. We can move on to the next item, and then you can check in with us.
Yeah, I can get that to you later.
All right, that works for me. Thank you. So I would like to entertain a motion that the order is complied with. I will ask Councilor Puello to file another order around the trees in Ward 2, specifically what the costs are, what the benefits of removing them or treating them. And
Thank you.
if you want, you can add me onto that order as well.
Will do. Thank you.
Awesome. So
I'd like to make a motion that
Can I just add?
Yes.
We need to get boots on the ground if we want to get anything done. I know you folks all know that.
Mm-hmm.
Dire Strait. The only way to correct the problem is to get some folks here.
Some bodies. Yep.
Yep. We're doing it the most expensive way possible right now.
Yeah. Thank you, and we really appreciate you coming in to take the time to inform us and let us know that.
absolutely, yeah.
So, Councilor Givner.
There you go. I'd like to make a motion that item 1 be complied with.
Second that motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you
Thank
guys
you
again for
very
your time. So,
Good.
item 2, I'll entertain a
Motion to take up item 2.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 2 was filed by myself and Councilor Tallman. Ordered that the mayor organize an advisory committee that will work in collaboration with the Public Health Department and Public Safety Committee that will work on coordinating reentry services for those reentering society, specifically the city of Holyoke. At the moment, I do not think there's anyone with regards to the Public Health Department or the mayor's office present.
I also don't see Councilor Tallman
No,
present.
Councilor Tallman mentioned to me that he would not be making it.
Okay.
So I will entertain a motion to table this item.
Yeah, so a motion to table item 2.
Second. All in favor?
Okay. Motion to take up item 3.
Second. All in favor?
Okay.
Item 3 was filed by Councilor Jordan. Order that the police chief provide the city council with a performance report on how ShotSpotter is performing and what we are learning about gun activity in the city so far. Please email the city council our reports available ASAP for our review so we can be prepared for this discussion.
So
Councilor Jordan is not
it's also not present.
actually present. I normally we don't move on these orders if the person that wrote the order is not present. But
Chief Pratt is here.
Chief Pratt is here, and I kind of don't want to waste his time. I think what I'll do is at the end of this item, I'll possibly table it just to make sure Councilor Jordan has a chance to be able to speak later on in the future. Is that okay?
I think if Chief Pratt is here and wants to
Oh, we're gonna
present,
run it.
we can just
We're gonna run it
do
regardless.
it and then it's complied with.
All right. So we'll decide that at the end. Chief Pratt, go ahead. The floor is yours.
Okay, I saw I got the invite, and I did pass along a report today to Jeffrey that we compiled. Sort of, I just wanted to get something to the council that you could look at. It was a combination of the 3 months that we've been sort of in business with ShotSpotter since we started March, April, and May. I guess the main thing that we're noticing is just the, sheer amount of shots fired calls compared to the ones that are actually called in. So we are seeing that as if you look at did you all get the report?
Yes, we do have the report. I think we got it today, but we're all looking at it. I mean,
Yeah, it was very simple. I was trying to keep it real simple just so we could look at some numbers and talk. And I think that was my understanding, was just to get the conversation going. We do have ShotSpotter will be sending we're working on that right now. After 3 months, they set it up where they come up with an analyst to go over some training with our detectives to help using the data to aid in investigations. And so we're going to get some of that training in conjunction with the Springfield Police. So they're kind of setting that up with us in Springfield as we speak. My hope is that they'll be coming shortly, and we'll have that, which will also help us put probably some better data out there as well, help us understand the data better as we put it out. But as you can see from the charts, the ShotSpotter, in the 3 months, there's been 141 activations, but we only had 9 calls, 911 calls on those. So 132 of them we only knew about through ShotSpotter. So that to us is pretty significant. And that's what the biggest trend I've noticed. The map that we have there is more of a map of all of the, as you can see on the right, it explains the yellow squares are things they picked up, but they're just outside of the zone, but the ShotSpotter will still hear those and track them. They're just not in our zone coverage, so they are not as, I wouldn't say they're not as accurate. They won't guarantee it because they're not in the coverage, but they still make us aware of them. And so we included everything so that you could see what is going on. Where you see the pinpoint, the rounder markings, those are actual ShotSpotter reported to us within the zone. If there's a couple outside the zone, which I can see clearly, those are ones that because we collaborate with ShotSpotter after the fact. So if they were detected and we respond there, or they could have been potentially a 911 call that we went to, we relay that back to ShotSpotter, and then they update the map to indicate that yes, it is a confirmed ShotSpotter activation, to try to give us better data to say that this is exactly what we're. So it doesn't just look like an outlier. We know it in fact to be a shooting.
Thank you.
But yeah, and then the other graph here that it's comparison to last year, to the right there, for March, April, and May. You know, you can clearly see that we are getting more notifications through ShotSpotter. So I think, at least for me, in the big picture of things, I like the idea that the police department is getting notified one way or the other. It doesn't really matter to us which way it comes in, but I think it's important that the public, after hearing shots, even if they don't call in, and I understand the reasons why, that at least they're seeing police cars respond to that immediate area. We found that the pinpoint that they're giving us is extremely accurate. We're coming right to the locations of where the shots are happening, rather than getting a call that might be 2 or 3 blocks away and we're responding there. We are, even if we are getting that call in conjunction with the ShotSpotter, we're using both to get us to the right spot. And I think that's important that the public sees, if nothing else, even if there's not anyone hit or anything happening, if you heard shots in your neighborhood, and then at least when you look out your window, you're seeing police officers driving around, I think that's important for the public to see. So I think that's one thing that has been.
So for a quick reference, Chief, I was in the flats one day and I heard a firecracker go off. I literally saw the sky light up, and not even 2 minutes later, I saw the police coming down, like circling the neighborhood. How do they differentiate the difference between a firecracker and a shot? Firecrackers are illegal. They are illegal.
Yeah. I can tell you that there is, I don't know if, well, you can see a couple on this map that are in like pink. Those are probably.
But our maps don't come in color.
Those are like 80% accuracy, and other noises that get depicted by the, we will respond to it if they give it to us. They may rule that out as, I don't know that specific incident. You know, I could probably, if you remember the date, I could probably find out, but
Like
whether
2
we
months
got
ago.
an actual ShotSpotter, or that could have obviously been somebody called it in as well. I mean, we do still get calls to the regular phone about fireworks.
Yeah, I thought
Probably,
somebody.
if you're saying it was that quick, my guess is that was either spotted by the officer and just responded, or it was given to us by ShotSpotter and they came into the area.
Yeah.
And that's the kind of stuff that we report back to ShotSpotter, that if that did come in as an activation, we respond within 2 minutes. Our guys look around and say, oh, it's fireworks, and that gets reported back. That gets reported back to ShotSpotter, and that gets corrected in the system.
Thank you. It just, for me, the map, when looking at it, like, a lot of it kind of doesn't make sense, right? I think maybe for me, in the future, the squares that are not actual activations, we might not need those, right? So that people can actually see where the actual activations are. Because for me, I feel like
that's not to say they're not activations. That's to say they're outside the zone.
Right,
so
but
they can still be shots fired. They're just not. What it is.
But they could be not shots fired too.
Of what ShotSpotter will guarantee. If they're within inside the zone, they guarantee like I forget the numbers now, it's like 90 something.
But these are like literally in like Rock Valley. Like these are like in Ward 5 and like the woods, it looks like.
Yeah.
And there's some in the Connecticut River. There's some on the bridge.
Those ones that are on the river are coming over the bridge. We've had several over there. One of those, you can't hardly see it, but it's actually 42 rounds. That one is actually a confirmed, it's outside the zone, but if you see that it's circular.
Yeah, I see it.
because we actually recovered the 42 shell casings, exactly 42, with what.
But was it
ShotSpotter,
something that was picked up by ShotSpotter? No, right? It was something that you guys reported to ShotSpotter because it's not in the encatchment zone.
So ShotSpotter initially tracked
That
that.
makes sense.
Okay, as it came in, then we responded, we found the 42 rounds, and they'll correct the map to make that circular so that it's like a confirmed, more accurate, it's an
But not a-
accuracy thing. It's not a confirmed or not confirmed, it's whether it's how accurate they are pinpointing it. So that one, because through us responding and finding the 42 rounds, it kind of confirmed what ShotSpotter, even though that is just outside the zone. Things just outside the zone are still picked up by ShotSpotter. It's just not guaranteed because it's not within the zone. If that makes any sense.
It does make sense, but I guess for the sake of measuring things consistently, it doesn't make
You
sense.
want to know which ones are,
Yeah, so like I look at the flats
You wanna
right
know
now.
which ones are
I'm looking at the flat section right now, and literally it looks like there's only been maybe one shooting in the flats over the last 3 months, right? That one little pointed thingamajigger. I'm proud. I'm proud as hell. Like, that's amazing, right? But then you look over, you go up to like Ward 4-ish, and you go higher up into the city, there's a lot more shootings and a lot more activity happening according to this. According to this, Ward 4 is a very active neighborhood, like all the way up by like Stop and Shop. So like for me, that's kind of confusing, right? Because there aren't actually any reports coming out of that I know of, right? Unless we're not getting that
blow those
information.
maps up and figure out exactly where those are, but I would say that it's not, I mean, I'm trying to look at the map myself to get a reference point, but obviously you can tell the flats where a bulk of those are like Beach Street and below. If that's the bridge going over, that bulk you see by where you're calling 4, that's all like, I would say from
Mitchell Field area.
Ryan Maple up to Beach Street, closer to the riverside, and then
Yeah.
to the side of that would be Churchill, and below that would be probably, South Holyoke. So I don't think that's shocking.
That's
to
more
me
like
anyway.
Springdale, Ingleside area.
It's starting to go down into Springdale. I see that too. We have had several down in that area. Some of these are over on top of each other. I don't know if you could tell.
Yeah.
Some of them are like,
And that's that is expect
spot.
for me, that like some of that is expected, like especially in known higher crime areas. It's expected that some of them will be piled on top of each other. But there's a lot. I guess this is giving a frame of reference with regards to where our most heavily crime areas, like the ideology and the thought process that we think might be a little off. Kind of sounds like according to this.
Chief Pratt, is there an interactive map that exists that we could that we can access and blow it up and see these things happening, or is this created separately with these reports?
well, this is the one we put on the website.
Okay.
As far as blowing it up, I don't think it's not interactive on the website, but I think I know from ShotSpotter, we can get the actual address that is pinpointed as the shooting. You know what I mean? Like, so it comes out like on a list, like with the actual address.
Okay, I was just curious if it was like almost like a Google map where anybody could go and look and kind of zoom in and see things. So thanks.
Any other questions by any other counselors that are present at the moment? And thank you again, Chief Pratt. I was going to say Chief Scott. Oh my God. Traumatized. Wait, give me a second. I got you.
Yeah.
I will say too, is just so you know that our plan is to continuously each month put the statistics out on our website, and leave the prior months there as well, so that people can do their own, comparison.
That scares me though, because I don't feel like these are accurate. I'll be honest with you. And to have people in the community that live in these specific wards, like, feel like they're in danger because of what they see, may not, in a sense, be beneficial to the city overall with regards to how we're marketing our city, with regards to how we're doing things in the city. Not to say that we need to hide our issues, right? But at the end of the day, unless we know for a fact that these are true and that the information is real, I don't feel like we should be putting it out there as fact. But I'm not the mayor. I'm not the guy that runs everything here. I am just one man. Ultimately, though, the information is beneficial with regards to, like, knowing where the hot areas are and providing people in the community an understanding of where the hot spots could be within the community, right? But I feel like that for us, there's got to be a better way to provide that information to the community without using scare tactics, in a sense. And not saying that that's what we're doing, but for some people that live in a certain ward and then they see all these numbers, they're like, oh my God, so many shootings in my neighborhood. It might impact them in a way where it's not positive. It may be a more negative impact. But I hear you and I agree with you about being transparent with the information, especially since we're paying for this.
I was initially going to hold off and do a more like every 3 months type of thing. But in talks with the mayor and the police community relations board, they felt that it was, that they would rather see the monthly stats for themselves, and so that, and they thought the public would want to see those as well, so that it wouldn't just be us putting out every 3 months what's happening. This way they can kind of do their own comparisons as well.
Technically, it would still be you guys putting out every 3 months.
I'm fine either way. Like, I'm good either way. I don't care if we wait a year to put them out. I think the stats will be the stats. And then also, too, the reason to wait longer, it helps us, because some of this also will be, through investigations as time goes on, we will be able to, like you're asking which ones are 100% proven out, we'll be able to have more time to do that, which will actually make the stats even more accurate, I would say.
Thank you. I got a couple counselors in the queue. Counselor GIVNER, since you're on the committee, I will recognize you first, and then I'll move on to everyone else.
Thank you. So I just was curious what you feel, Chief Pratt, that has been learned through the process so far, considering that the most recent ShotSpotter report shows 175 rounds fired with 26 shell casings recovered. So I'm wondering, why? I don't know. I don't know how to ask it any other way.
Well, what we can also we know is that several reasons why we don't always get shell casings. It's not always an automatic gun. It could be a revolver type gun. There wouldn't be shell casing. Sometimes people who are doing a shooting also can be in a car, which actually our very first one, the person who shot, those shell casings were in the car when we got there. So I think that what we have found mostly here in the police department, what I'm hearing from the police officers here, is that we are probably a little. We're also. I think our eyes are open to actually how many shot fired calls are coming in that are not reported. We recently had a shooting that was not called in, and we responded, and there was victims, and we were able to, begin life-saving measures right away. Unfortunately, that wasn't enough, but that was never called into the police department, 911. So that alone, to me, is what I think is the most important thing to me as the chief. I want to make sure that when something happens like violence, that we're responding. If it's wrong and it's fireworks or it's whatever, I still think that it's important that we respond to those to find out what is going on. And I think that the public wants us to do that. They want to know that the police are responding to the shots fired calls especially. And I feel like this so far has got us more in the area. There's several instances of us getting there very quickly and recovering rounds, weapons, making arrests that otherwise probably wouldn't have happened. So far, that's what we've noticed here at the police department, that I feel like we're at least being pointed in the right direction a lot quicker. And so far, that's our biggest tell. I mean, for me, I'm even a little taken back of how many actual incidents that we've had that are not called in. I knew that, obviously some aren't called in, and I wasn't surprised by that. I think I'm a little surprised at how many are not called in. So I like the fact that this is at least getting us in the area, and I understand why sometimes people don't want to call it. I totally understand that. But I like the idea that at least even those people that aren't calling in but have heard the shot, I like the idea that they at least see the police in the area looking and finding out what's going on. And even if we can't find nothing, at least they see police officers out there. I think that helps build trust with the community.
I definitely agree that helps build trust. I was just wondering if, sorry. I was just wondering, does ShotSpotter happen to also be able to detect the type of guns fired? Like automatic versus a revolver versus a shotgun?
No, I don't believe so. Not directly. I mean, I think I've listened to a few of them myself, and I can kind of tell that it's an automatic weapon just based on the sound. But I don't think it can differentiate specifically.
Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor GIVNER. Counselor Tessa Murphy-Ramboletti.
Thank you very much. Hi, Chief. Thanks so much for giving us a presentation. We appreciate it. I feel like I have more clarifying questions. The data that you showed us, does that, and I don't know if you said this with the map, but does it also identify or track how many times it picked up a sound that was not a gunshot?
Yes.
And that was the pink one? Like
No.
Okay, sorry.
No, the pink ones are more like they believe it's a gunshot. They give it to us anyway, even though. So there is a vetting that goes on through ShotSpotter when the sound comes in. They make a determination relatively quickly whether it's shots fired or not, and they send it to us. They don't send it to us if it's not in their, in their vetting a shot. But what they will send to us still are those pink ones that they think could be a shot. That a lot of times that probably is fireworks. A big M80 or something like that would sound like a shot. They may, if they're in doubt, they send it to us in the pink because they're going to want us to at least go check it out. But I think it comes out. It was like the accuracy thing I was telling you about. When they send us a pink one, they drop that accuracy down to about 80%, I believe, from 90 something percent if it's in yellow.
Okay. I think if we are going to end up sharing this information with the public regularly, I think it would be helpful maybe to like differentiate that more, just because like from this presentation, I didn't fully understand that. And if I'm someone who's living in one of those neighborhoods who's seeing something come up on a map, but maybe it's not actually gunshot related, I think just maybe making that super clear when people kind of see that information would be helpful. And then the only other question I have, the slide that you showed us, it mentioned that there were 10 arrests. And I'm just curious, I mean, are these 10 arrests, are they directly related to like the result of ShotSpotter? Do we track that information? And then my second assumption, are these 10 arrests, are they firearm related arrests?
I don't know the exact numbers. Yes, most of them. There may be also an arrest in there that's not for firearms specifically, but is related to the activation, I guess is the best way.
Okay. I guess, yeah, I'm trying to fully understand the process of it. So like if someone hears a gunshot, or not someone, if the ShotSpotter technology hears a gunshot and then someone gets arrested, but they're not getting arrested for having a firearm, I'm just trying to make sure that it's kind of like understood by the public what that process looks like.
So I guess the best way I could describe that is, let's suppose we don't have ShotSpotter and a police officer hears a gunshot and responds to that area.
Yep.
It's basically the same thing. It's just ShotSpotter's hearing it for us, and then we're responding to that area. The officer's going to react basically the way he would if he heard a shot. He's going to go to that area. He's going to investigate. Now, in the course of that investigation, I don't know the specifics of all 10 of these. I could certainly get that information, but you know, as you respond as an officer, you may witness a different crime, or you may just come upon a person that you know has a warrant.
Yeah.
You're going to still react as a police officer to that, even though you were initially coming there for what you heard when shots fired. So that's the kind of things that, you know, can potentially happen in these situations. So
okay, cool. I think
that's how I best describe it. It's the ShotSpotter is now our ears, and our police officers for years drove around with windows cracked slightly so they could hear, and if they heard something, they would respond to that area.
No, I get that.
Not like they would if they heard it.
You and I have talked about the crime analyst thing, and like I think that's also an important piece to it. Is like now that we have all this data, how do we best utilize the data that we have in order to be like, okay, this is effective because this is how many firearms arrests are happening, or this is how many arrests are happening directly as a result of that. So thank you. That helps clarify things. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you. You're all set, Councilor Murphy Rumboletti?
Councilor Tessa is all set. Thank you, Councilor Izzy.
To kind of follow up on that last piece, I think for me, the fear of false shooting, yes, it does provide a sense of knowing for the police officer, but at the same time, coming down thinking that there's a shooting, in my mind, it makes me feel uncomfortable because I feel like they're coming in hot, right? They're coming in looking for a shooter, an active shooter, defensive mode, probably guns out, making sure that things are okay. And it could be that it was something that wasn't that, and we might later on down the road pay a price for a possible mistake or a misunderstanding. So that's the fear that I have. But again, my perspective is different with regards to some of this stuff. Councilor Jose Maldonado Velez.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good evening, Chief Pratt. I think following just what Councilor Rivera was, I think saying just, you know, there is that fear of now you're putting officers into this more hostile environment where it's sending them directly into gunfire. And, you know, just looking at looking at this data, the thing with data, thing with statistics is like, depending on who is the holder of the data and the stats, they're gonna use the numbers and manipulate it in any way in order to fit their argument. So, we have this information from ShotSpotter, this for-profit company that, of course, wants to span and keep growing within our city, because that is what a for-profit company wants to do. So seeing all these numbers, as someone that's not going this deep, or if someone that just looks at this report briefly, and as a regular citizen, they look at it like, oh crap, like we have all these shootings, we have all these issues, and I want us as a city to like almost take it a step further. And I guess my question is around this. I understand it's still the first year, so there's still some more data that needs to come out. But some of the things that I would love to see, one is like, what is the actual response time now? So when there's an activation, and I think it's important that we say activation, because there's no way for ShotSpotter to really confirm that it is a gunshot unless it, from my understanding and from the previous conversations we've had, is that unless there's actual shell casing or an actual gun, you can't with 100% certainty say that it was a gunshot, right? So like making sure that we're starting to say activations of, there's a sound that was caught, and yeah, so just really being mindful of the terminology that we use. With that said, like looking at this data, I'm just, I guess, yes, following some clarifying questions. When I look at the top right where it says ShotSpotter activations, which is the blue, that's 54 in May. And then I look up on the left, it says 175 rounds fired. So does that mean that there were 54 activations, and within those 54 activations, there were 175 shots fired? Is that what that means?
Yes.
Okay. And with 100% certainty, we can say that they were actual gunshots.
No, not 100% certainty. 90. I'd have to get that percentage, like 90 plus. I want to say it's like 94% accuracy or something. It might be even higher, like 96.
Okay. Would love to see
that's
what
their accuracy rate that they feel comfortable telling us that it's a gunshot.
Okay. Yeah, because I mean, to the point, I understand that now all gunshots need to be out. I'll be honest, I don't know much about guns, so you talking about revolvers and stuff, I guess it does make sense that not all shell casing will be found. But it is going back to my earlier point. It's almost ShotSpotter's painting this picture of our city, of like one of the most dangerous cities ever. It's gunshots all the time, and even looking at where the most activations are happening, that is literally the intersection of where I live. Yeah, it's scary to see like what ShotSpotter can do with this data, and I just want us again as a city to take it a step further. So I guess there's two things. You mentioned a lot about people not calling into the city, and we've had this discussion before, and I think it was taken a little out of proportion what was said last time. But I think as a city, I think we as the city of Holyoke do have an issue as enforcement as a whole. The fire department is not the only department that people call when they want something to be done. They call the Board of Health, they call the building department, they call all these different offices. And when no enforcement is happening across the board, and that culture of the city's not there for anyone, I think seeps in. So, I also, as much as there is that real relationship between what the police and our community, there's also the reality that overall the city hasn't really responded to any sort of enforcement. So I guess my hope is that if we are using this technology, that we're using it in a way that people will then feel actually comfortable calling in, because they truly do feel that the people will show up, and not just based it on this I don't know, these sounds or these devices these surveillance devices that we have around our city. I think another thing, I guess in the request of taking it a step further, we have these 10 arrests that happened in a span of 3 months. What were the results of those arrests? Really interested to see if it was true, I guess to Councilor Murphy-Ramboletti's point, like, would love to see more report, a report or something that gives more details as to what those arrests actually were, what the charges actually were. I understand one of the first ShotSpotter activations where someone was arrested, he was already out within a week. I'm not saying that he shouldn't be out, but either way, I think, are we truly keeping people out of the street or getting them to the help that they need, as this is the picture that ShotSpotter is painting? So I guess for me, I want us to dig a little deeper into the statistics and make sure, my ask is one, dig a little deeper and also really be mindful of the language that we're using. Maybe a little definition saying that activations does not actually mean gunshots, just so that people are aware of sort of like, what ShotSpotter actually does. I think that the name ShotSpotter automatically paints this picture of like we're going after shots, but the reality, that's not what it is. ShotSpotter is a surveillance device, it's a listening device. So I think it's us to make sure that we're not giving a disservice to our community and painting this horrible picture, but instead, we're using this to really investigate and really dig deeper and really find actual solutions to some of the problems. I'm looking forward to seeing more reports. I hope that the next reports, I'm not sure what kind of report ShotSpotter gives. I don't know if this is the only thing that it gives, but I would love to have more information. I think the order itself read all the reports that exist, and I find it hard to believe that this is the only type of report that ShotSpotter would give. If it is, then it is a little scary because, again, there's a report as a ShotSpotter, as a for-profit company. They're there to paint a picture, to grow, and to make more money. And I'm asking you as a Holyoke Police Department to really take this information and really, shift through it and not just paint the narrative of like, we need more, but like, hey, no, this is how we can actually help the community. That's all I got for tonight.
Thank you, Councilor Maldonado Velez. Councilor Will Puello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions, just a general comment. I want to thank the folks in the police department and you, Chief, too, for using this technology. I was really happy to see it voted through. It's sad that it took 2 votes, but it is what it is. When you see all these circles and all these squares and all these different shapes, I mean, a lot of them down in Ward 2, you can't help but to like feel a certain way. And, it's kind of like incredible, really. It's like, oh my God, 93% unreported calls, 5 victims. If, like the chief said so nicely earlier, if one person could have received help and aid, and lives been saved. I mean, this is just such a beautiful piece of technology, just something that is, I'm so happy that this is here. I'm so happy that, the police is using this, and just thank you so much for putting this forward to be used. And, I do want to say one last comment. I can't imagine what this chart would look like if our police department looked a certain way. Other people are putting orders that, in my opinion, are a little dangerous, talking about, well, maybe we need to change the police, or maybe we need to make them look like a different department. I mean, just imagine how this chart would look if our police department looked any different than what it did now, in a bad way, in a negative way. So I just think it's so important that we continue to use this. I hope this stays. I hope folks fund it. I hope folks support it. And thank you guys for doing the work you're doing down there.
Thank you, Councilor Puello. Thank you for your candidness. To be honest, we may disagree with regards to what this data actually shows, but at least I appreciate the fact that you're working for your constituents and you're doing what needs to be done. Same for the chief. It's not nothing personal with regards to this. For me, getting my master's degree actually opened my eyes into data collection and how it's actually done. And in my mind, I think that if I presented this in my class, I'd get it. I wouldn't get a passing grade, just because there are a lot of questions. There are a lot of things that are left out with regards to what is called a lot of unknown factors, and nobody's kind of like addressing that. And not to say that the chief has to address that, because again, you're the chief. One day we'll have an analyst that'll be able to address these things and speak to us in the language that kind of makes sense with regards to public administration and how we as a department manage our public safety. So again, I appreciate your time. I appreciate the police force. I appreciate everything that's done for us in the community. And I thank fellow councilors for being here and speaking up. Councilor Jose Maldonado Velez, I see your hand raised again. Is that a second time, or is that you
No,
never-
it's still a race, but I'll just finish off real quick. I sometimes ramble and I forget what I actually wanted to say. I guess my request is when we do these reports again, I would love to see something like what the response time actually is from the time there is an activation to the time that the police officer is up there. I think from there, like, what is the amount of time that's being spent in these calls? You know, we're talking about all of a sudden from 54 more calls now being called. Simply because of this system, and I already understand based on past conversations of how short for time the police officers are and all the departments and whatnot. So, you know, how this actually affects as far as like time, as far as overtime and spending time on these sort of calls. And I guess my third request is really seeing what the results are of the arrest. Like, what is the follow through? What happens afterwards? Are we truly making our city safer? Like, I know, again, I guess we'll see it a year from now, the numbers go down, 175, 159, 154. Yes, it does. It is trending. No, actually, it went higher. March, April, May, so 154, 150, 175. So is it actually making our city safer? You know, so yes, it's catching more sounds. Yes, it's putting more officers out there, possibly getting someone that has a warrant and, you know, off the streets and all that. But overall, is this technology actually truly making our city safer? And I guess we won't know that actual answer until at least a year of data or two. But those are my three request data points that I would love to see in a report. And also any information, you know, against Councilor Rivera's point, to my point earlier, data statistics are going to be used by whoever's collecting the data in any which way that they want to paint the narrative, to paint the picture they want. That's the lovely thing about statistics. What are we doing to make sure that we're not falling prey to ShotSpotter? You know, at the end of the day, I don't want to be married to a for-profit organization. I want to make sure that we're doing our work and making sure, again, that we're keeping our community safe. Yes, using these numbers, but what other numbers are we using as a police department to make sure that we, again, are actually making our streets safer? Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Maldonado Velez. So I don't mind entertain a motion that the order be complied with.
I mean,
Unless we want to table it for,
then we have to bring.
but then with the chief we'll have to come back in. So yeah, no,
I think we can table and run.
I'll reach out to Councilor Jordan and I'll let him know.
All right.
And then we'll
We'll figure it out from
yeah.
there. Okay.
So I'll entertain
I'll-
a motion that the order is complied with.
Make a motion that item 3 be complied with.
A second. All in favor?
Okay.
Aye.
Thank you, Chief Pratt.
Thank you, Chief.
No problem. Thank you.
I would like to entertain a motion to take up item 8 and 12 as a package.
Motion to take up items 8 and 12 as a package.
8, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 8 was filed by Councilor Anderson Burgos. Order that that DPW and Parks and Recs look into making Brayheim Park a kids and dog park. As it stands, only half the park is being utilized. And then item 12 is Councilor Anderson Burgos also ordered that the DPW superintendent provide the city council with an update to the tree list. Update should include how trees are prioritized and obstacles of DPW facing addressing them. This is a constituent request. So Councilor Anderson Burgos, you have the floor.
Yeah, so I believe that Tom Reynolds had reached out or sent an email regarding item number 8. And what it sounds like to me is that there's, right now, the park is multiple use, and adding a third use is not priority right now.
Oh.
Not that it's not priority,
Okay.
but he did mention he would like to seek out a second location for another dog park, but that's a little bit further down the road.
So, for clarification, right? He said that there's already that the park's the extra space at the park is already being utilized. Pretty
It is,
much.
correct.
So, using installing a dog park there would be a detriment to the people that utilize the park.
Correct.
Okay. And the people that are utilizing the parks are like local leagues and stuff like that, right? It's
Yeah.
not just regular random
Yeah,
people?
right.
Okay.
And so
perfect.
it would be difficult to differentiate when you can use it as a dog park and when you can't. So it doesn't make sense.
If you fence in an actual dog park like Community Field, it's possible. But again, I'm biased on this one because I know that girls softball and so do Little League Baseball use that for little kids to do their little tykes leagues. So, Councilor Givner.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, come on.
I had asked about doing a dog park in Ward 4, and I was told I need to get community signatures and support. So I think as long as you started that process, I have to look into more how much support is needed. And we have that park across from Stop and Shop that's really not very much utilized for anything but people walking their dogs. So that one definitely, I don't think would get any pushback. So that's something where I need to work more in getting more people involved to see if they'd be interested. But I feel like we have a similar plight ahead of us in, creating a dog, like a fenced off section for small and large dogs, separate or whatever. So I think it can come together, but I don't know that it's as easy as, declaring it. I think we have to go out and get the signatures and support and have people come in for a public hearing and all that good stuff, from what I understand.
Thank you. So what would you like for this order to be complied with?
Yeah, I would recommend that it be complied with, and once we get closer to what he had thoughts of as far as seeking out a second location or another location for a dog park, we can revisit that.
Laurel Street Park would be a nice place.
Uh-huh.
I said Laurel Street Park would be a nice place. Right next to my house, and everybody walks their dog there.
Right?
So for item 12, because they're a package, and we'll vote them together, because I believe both of them are gonna be complied with, right?
Right. Yeah.
That is correct. I received the list from DPW director, and it's complied with just because I have the list now.
All right. Thank you. So I'll entertain a motion that item 8 and item 12.
Items 8 and 12 be complied with.
Second.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Motion to take up item 4.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item 4 was filed by Councilor Bacon, Puello, and Tallman. Order that local inspections of retail marijuana establishment for compliance with laws selling to 21 plus, similar to those for cigarettes and alcohol, be completed in coordination with the Cannabis Commission. Okay. So I am going to recommend to table this because I don't see Councilor Bacon. Well, Councilor Puello is present. Here we go. Go ahead, Councilor Puello. What would you like to do with this order? Because right now I am confused.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think so. I spoke with Councilor Bacon. So the intent behind the order was just to see if maybe we could get an update either from the Board of Health or whoever's doing inspections on retail sales. I'm not sure if we got any information. I didn't see anything in the
Nope,
email.
me neither. So I'm planning to host a specific meeting just with the Board of Health within a couple months. Not a couple months because we're going on break. And that would be August, I would say. So I could actually table this item and make sure that it's put on that particular meeting so that way he's able to address it.
Thank you.
All right, perfect. Thank you.
Motion that item 4 be tabled.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. Motion to take up item 5.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item 5 was filed by Councilor GIVNER. Order that the city of Holyoke address poorly and unplowed alleyways. Residents on the block of 192 Walnut Street have been paying to have alley plowed. Damn. Why are these not being plowed by the city if they are used by DPW for refuse pickup and access for fire, utilities, and police? So we don't have DPW present with us, but I can answer this question.
Yeah, I feel like we went over this at some point.
So just to answer the question for the public,
Yes.
Alleyways are halfway resident owned, and the other half is the other resident that's on the other side of the alleyway. So the responsibility falls on residents to maintain and to take care of their alleyways.
I think that's known.
Yeah.
The question here was specifically since DPW needs to use the alleyways because their trash is actually picked up in those alleyways.
I believe it would be the same as
It's the
shoveling your
same
sidewalk.
problem. Yeah.
As shoveling.
But we
your
don't
sidewalk.
plow our streets.
No, but we shovel the sidewalk,
Yeah.
and you have to kind of. I don't want to get like I'm not
I
trying.
think we need to table this for
Okay,
an
I'm with
official
it.
answer from
I'm with it.
someone.
I'm with it. We could table.
Motion that item 5 be tabled.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. Motion to take up item 6.
Item 6. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Item 6 is filed by Councilor Jordan, Bartley, and Tallman. Order that DPW and Sewer Commission do a study and seriously consider adopting a sewer maintenance insurance program for homeowners that is modeled off the Water Department's water maintenance insurance program. The Water Department program has been a great accomplishment and has been very warmly received by residents who appreciate this very low cost protection. Neither of the three are here, and it looks like we would need someone on the Sewer Commission, which would be DPW people? Or-
Probably. I thought this was all covered in that last finance meeting with the presentation, but I could be wrong.
Possibly. So I guess.
Motion to table it.
Go ahead, Councilor Puello.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I spoke with Councilor Bartley. Our hearts go out to him and his family. So he wasn't able to make it, but he did request if we could table this. It is separate with the water insurance.
Okay, that's perfect. I was
didn't
planning
see
on doing that
anything.
too because I don't have any of the three that signed on to the order to actually elaborate.
Thank you.
Motion to table item 6.
Second, all in favor?
Aye. Motion to take up item 7.
Item second, all in favor?
Aye.
Item 7 was filed by Councilor McGee. Order that stop with people, bro. Order that the Public Safety Committee invite in the Water Department to discuss and address the water issue on Michelle Lane. Neither Councilor McGee or the Water Department is present.
Motion to table item 7.
Second, all in favor?
Aye. Motion to take up item 9.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Filed by Councilor McGee, order that the Board of Health, Community Development Mayor do a survey of City Hall and the Annex Building in order to prioritize the top needs for improvements of the two buildings, i.e. elevators, mold removal, carpets, etc. I will entertain a motion to table this one as well.
Motion to table item 9.
Second,
Motion to take up item 10.
all in favor?
Aye.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Item 10 was filed by then Councilor Terry Murphy. Ordered that here we go again, that the Public Safety Committee meet with representatives from the Opioid Substance Abuse Task Force, the Health Director, and Judge William Halley to discuss the need for short-term residential transition program to assess individuals returning from a treatment program. The goal of this would be to improve the chances of long-term success for these individuals. The resident capacity would be probably around 20 beds. I put this one in so that some of the counselors, first of all, the idea is it's in the jacket and it'll be there forever if I don't take it up. So I'm taking it up to either leave to withdraw with it or to table it and actually take up the item in the future.
Makes sense to leave to withdraw and let someone else do a new order.
So I'm actually feeling like leave to withdraw, and then we just refile the order to bring in Judge Hadley and the Opioid Substance Abuse Task Force just to give us an
Put it
update.
all over.
Yeah.
Okay. Motion
Mr.
to.
Chair?
Yes, speaking.
Yeah, just one note on that. When this was first taken up in January of 2021, Judge Hadley was one of the people invited to that. At that time, he specifically said that because of his position, it would be inappropriate for him to participate. So if a new order is filed, I would recommend not including him.
Got it.
Thank you for that. That is good information.
All right. So motion that item 10 be that item 10 has a leave to withdraw.
Second, all in favor?
Aye. And motion to take up item 11.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Item 11 was filed by then Councilors Murphy, Lisi, and Hernandez. Ordered that, wow, that the mayor and the health director appear before the Public Safety Committee to provide an update on the potential for the city to establish a homeless shelter potentially at the War Memorial Building. This is another item that I put in that was in the jacket. The intention for me is for leave to withdraw, but if any other counselor has an opposition to it, I think I would still motion to leave to withdraw and have you file another order.
All right. Motion to leave to withdraw item 11.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
And Motion
to adjourn.
Second.
Aye.
All in favor? Aye. Everybody have a good night and thank you for your time.